She was just 8 years old, small, quiet, standing on a stage meant for leaders and soldiers. No one expected her to speak. But when she looked the current president of the United States, Donald Trump, in the eyes and asked, "Why couldn't you stop my father from dying?" the entire room fell silent, and no speechwriters could prepare for it. No cameras could fully capture the weight of her voice. What started as a simple farewell ceremony turned into something else entirely. Something raw, something real. This isn't just about politics. It's about a little girl who shattered the silence with a single question. A question that pulled at the heart of a nation and left even the most powerful man in the world without an answer. Stay until the end, because what she said next and what the president did in response will stay with you forever. There are moments in history that don't explode like thunder. They fall like whispers, quiet but impossible to forget. They don't come with warning signs or roaring applause. They come with the stillness before a storm, with the gentle grip of a child's hand tightening around a microphone. And sometimes it's not a president's speech or a bill being passed that leaves the deepest mark. It's a question asked softly when no one's ready. It was supposed to be just another warm spring afternoon on the south lawn of the White House. The kind of perfectly timed public relations event where children from across the country were flown in to ask former President Donald Trump their questions on camera. It was meant to be charming, harmless. Kids in red, white, and blue hats, waving little flags and asking things like, "What's your favorite candy?" Or "Did you play sports as a kid?" The kind of content networks love to air in between headlines, a humanizing break in the constant political storm. Trump was his usual self that day, larger than life, suited in dark navy with a bright red tie, smiling wide under the DC sun as he stood behind a polished podium flanked by Secret Service and staffers. Photographers clicked away, journalists scribbled in notepads or filmed short reels for social media, and the country tuned in without knowing it was about to witness something that would be replayed for years to come. Among the kids sat a girl, barely noticeable at first, wearing a pale blue dress, shoes slightly too big, her dark braids uneven and tied with faded ribbons, her name tag crooked on her chest. Emery, age 8, Kansas. She hadn't smiled once. While other kids giggled and nudged each other or practiced their questions nervously, Emery sat still, staring at the man on stage as if he were a riddle she couldn't quite solve. When her name was called, she didn't hesitate. She stood and walked to the microphone with the small, practiced dignity of someone much older. And in that moment, something in the crowd shifted. No one knew why, but the air suddenly felt tighter, like the moment before a hard rain. "Hi there, sweetheart," Trump said, the way he always did with kids, leaning down slightly and flashing that broad, familiar smile. "Go ahead. What's your question?" And then Emery, her voice soft but clear, asked the words that would freeze the lawn, silence the news crews, and make America listen. "Why didn't you stop my dad from dying?" The words fell heavy, heavier than any speech or scandal, cutting through the spring breeze like glass. A collective silence rippled across the audience. Reporters lowered their cameras. Children looked at each other in confusion, and adults stared with the kind of horror that comes only when you realize something sacred has just been broken open. Trump blinked. Just for a second, the ever-ready mask slipped. He looked at her, then at the crowd, then back at the girl, unsure if he had misheard. "I'm sorry, could you say that again?" Emery nodded. Her small fingers clenched the sides of the microphone. "My dad was a soldier. He said he was going to come home, but then he didn't. Mama says he died during your presidency. And I just want to know, did you even know his name?" The silence deepened. A woman somewhere in the back choked on a sob. A child whispered, "What's going on?" But no one answered. Trump's expression, caught by every camera angle, faltered. Not the performative pause of a man looking for the right political spin, but something else. For once, the practiced lines didn't come. He glanced at one of his aides who stared back at him with wide eyes and shook her head slightly, signaling that there was no briefing, no prep, no way out. He turned back to Emery and, with a strange gentleness in his voice, asked, "What was your dad's name?" "Staff Sergeant Marcus Hill," she said without hesitation. "He wrote me letters." He said he was tired. He wanted to come home, but he kept getting sent back. He said maybe if someone up high heard about it, they'd help. But I guess nobody ever listened. Her words weren't angry. That was what made it worse. She wasn't screaming or accusing. She was just asking, like a child who truly wanted to understand why her father never came back. Trump took a step back. He looked stunned. Whatever his politics, whatever the opinions formed about him across the world, in that moment, he was not a politician. He was just a man standing before a little girl whose world had shattered under the weight of war. I don't know every name, he said finally, but I wish I did. Emery didn't say anything. Instead, she reached in her pocket and pulled out a small, folded paper, worn at the corners, smudged with what looked like fingerprints and faint pink crayon. She held it up. This was his last letter. I brought it. I thought maybe you could read it now. You're the only one I haven't given it to yet. A tremor went through the crowd. Trump looked at her for a moment, then stepped forward and knelt slightly to take the letter from her outstretched hand. He didn't open it right away. He just held it, staring at the little girl in front of him. This 8-year-old with old eyes, who had carried a piece of her father through the gates of power and asked a question no adult had dared to. Reporters began to lower their cameras, not out of instruction, but out of instinct. The moment had become too human, too real for politics. Somewhere to the left, a soldier in uniform took off his hat. I'll remember his name now, Trump said quietly. Then, carefully, he slipped the letter into the inner pocket of his jacket. The crowd remained silent. There was nothing left to say. Emery turned and walked back to her seat with the same quiet grace she'd had when she arrived. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She had done what she came to do. And in her silence, in the space left behind by that one question, the world held its breath. News anchors tried to recover, spinning commentary into analysis, but their words felt empty. The clip went viral before the sun set. Millions watched as the little girl in blue asked a question that sliced through the noise like lightning across a quiet sky. And for the first time in a long time, people weren't just reacting, they were thinking. Who else had died unheard? How many children were still waiting for answers? What happened to the letters that never made it to the top? And why did it take a child to ask the question no one else would? That night, photos of Emery were on every screen. Some called it a media stunt. Others claimed it was staged. But those who had been there, who had felt the tension, who had heard the tremble in her voice, knew better. She was just a little girl who loved her father. A little girl who carried his memory into the heart of power and laid it down without flinching. And as the lights dimmed over D.C., and the clip played on repeat, one question echoed in living rooms and headlines alike, whispered by millions who had watched the silence fall on the South Lawn. Did you even know his name? At the Hill Project's opening ceremony, she stood in front of hundreds of people, soldiers, survivors, government officials, and read part of her dad's letter aloud. She didn't stumble. She didn't shake, because she wasn't alone anymore. She was surrounded by names. And as she ended her speech, she looked out over the crowd and said, "Some people think kids are too young to understand war. Maybe we are, but we're not too young to remember, and we're not too young to ask the hard questions." The applause didn't thunder. It bloomed, slow, rising like something sacred. After the ceremony, someone tapped her shoulder. An older man, tears in his eyes. He said, "My son died in that same year. I didn't think anyone would ever say his name again, but you made me remember. Thank you." She hugged him. No words were needed. Later, when she stood alone at the reflecting pool, she looked down into the water and saw her reflection, older than she remembered, eyes steady, a metal pin to her chest. Somewhere inside her, she still missed him. She always would. But she had spoken. She had asked the question no one else would. And in doing so, she made the world pause. Just long enough to listen. Just long enough to remember a name. Because sometimes it takes a child to break through the noise, to ask the question that haunts the silence. And sometimes when the world listens, it doesn't just echo back. It changes.